47 times. That's how many warnings were sent. 47 written reports. 47 desperate attempts to stop what was about to happen. 47 times the people in power said the same thing. We'll look into it later. Later never came. On January 28, 1986, 7 astronauts boarded Space Shuttle Challenger. They had no idea that engineers were on the phone at that exact moment, begging NASA officials to stop the launch. They had no idea that the rocket boosters strapped to their spacecraft had a fatal flaw that had been documented 47 times. They had no idea they had 73 seconds to live. But this isn't just a story about the Challenger. Because while those 47 warnings were being ignored, 47 other disasters were brewing around the world. Each one documented, each one preventable, each one ignored until it was too late. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you see authority. Because the pattern I'm going to reveal proves something terrifying. The deadliest disasters in human history don't happen because nobody saw them coming. They happen because the people who did see them coming were silenced, dismissed, or ignored. And it's still happening right now. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why warnings fail, who profits from ignoring them, and how to recognize when you're living through the warning phase of the next catastrophe. And I promise you, once you see this pattern, you'll never unsee it. January 27, 1986, Cape Canaveral, Florida. The temperature was 36 degrees Fahrenheit. For Florida, this was brutally cold. Ice had formed on the launch pad overnight. NASA engineers were concerned, but the forecast showed temperatures rising. The launch was scheduled for 11:38 a.m. At 7 a.m., engineer Bob Ebeling sat in a conference room at Morton Thiokol, the company that manufactured the solid rocket boosters for the Space Shuttle. He was on a conference call with NASA officials, and he was terrified. 24 hours earlier, Bob and his team had sent an urgent recommendation to NASA. Do not launch below 53 degrees Fahrenheit. The O-rings that sealed the rocket booster segments became rigid in cold temperatures. They lost their ability to flex and seal properly. If an O-ring failed during launch, superheated gas would escape, hit the external fuel tank, and cause a catastrophic explosion. This wasn't speculation. Morton Thiokol had documented O-ring erosion on previous flights. They had photographs showing heat damage. They had test data proving the O-rings lost resilience below 53 degrees. They had temperature correlation charts showing that every previous O-ring incident occurred on cold weather launches. Bob Ebeling presented this data on the conference call. He recommended delaying the launch until temperatures rose. NASA officials pushed back. They wanted proof that it was unsafe to launch, rather than proof it was safe. They asked Thiokol engineers to prove the O-rings would fail, rather than asking them to prove the O-rings would work. This is what's called normalizing deviance. When you fly enough missions with minor problems that don't cause catastrophe, the problems stop seeming dangerous. NASA had launched shuttles with O-ring erosion before. Those shuttles had landed safely. So the erosion became an accepted risk rather than a critical flaw. At 8:45 a.m., Morton Thiokol management overruled their own engineers. They officially recommended proceeding with the launch. Bob Ebeling turned to his colleague and said 6 words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "We're going to kill those astronauts." At 11:38 a.m., Space Shuttle Challenger launched. The temperature at the launch pad was 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 degrees below the minimum safe temperature identified by engineers. At 0.6 seconds after ignition, cameras captured puffs of black smoke emerging from the aft field joint of the right solid rocket booster. The O-ring had failed immediately. Hot gas was escaping. For the next 58 seconds, the escaping gas burned through the O-ring completely. It began vaporizing the putty that provided a secondary seal. By 59 seconds into flight, a plume of flame was visible, burning through the booster casing. At 60 seconds, the flame plume hit the external fuel tank strut. At 64 seconds, the strut failed. The right solid rocket booster, no longer attached properly, pivoted and struck the external tank. The tank, filled with 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, ruptured. At 73 seconds after launch, the external tank exploded. The orbiter Challenger was ripped apart by aerodynamic forces as it continued traveling at twice the speed of sound. Commander Francis Scobie, pilot Michael Smith, mission specialists Judith Risnick, Ellison Onizuka, and Ronald McNair, payload specialist Gregory Jarvis, and teacher Krista McAuliffe, who was supposed to be the first teacher in space. All 7 died. But here's the horrifying detail that most people don't know. They didn't die in the explosion. The crew cabin remained intact and continued ascending for another 25 seconds before falling into the Atlantic Ocean. Evidence suggests at least 3 astronauts activated their emergency oxygen supplies, meaning they were conscious during the fall. They had 2 minutes and 45 seconds to realize what was happening before the cabin hit the water at over 200 miles per hour. The Presidential Commission investigating the disaster found that the decision to launch was flawed. They found that engineers' concerns had been overridden. They found that safety warnings had been dismissed as overcautious. But here's what the commission didn't emphasize. The O-ring problem had been documented 47 times before the Challenger disaster. 47 instances of O-ring erosion, blow-by, or anomalies across previous shuttle missions. 47 warnings that were reviewed, noted, and ultimately ignored because previous flights had succeeded despite the flaw. Bob Ebeling carried the guilt of Challenger for 30 years. In interviews before his death in 2016, he said he should have done more. He should have screamed louder. He should have refused to sign off. But he was one engineer in a massive bureaucracy, and the institutional pressure to launch was overwhelming. Challenger didn't happen because of a technical failure. The O-ring flaw was known. Challenger happened because NASA's institutional culture had learned to ignore warnings, and 7 people paid with their lives. But NASA isn't unique. Every industry has this problem, and the next disaster I'm going to show you proves that when corporations ignore warnings, the death toll can be exponentially higher. April 20th, 2010. The Deepwater Horizon oil rig floated 41 miles off the Louisiana coast, drilling the deepwater Macondo well. At 5,000 feet below the ocean surface, it was one of the deepest wells ever drilled, and it was about to become the largest marine oil spill in history. But it wasn't an accident. It was 47 ignored warnings compressed into 24 hours of catastrophic decision-making. Let me take you inside that final day. By April 20th, the Macondo well was nearly complete. All that remained was sealing it with cement before moving the rig to the next location. The cement job was critical. If the cement didn't properly seal the well, high-pressure oil and gas could flow up the wellbore and explode onto the rig. Halliburton, the company responsible for cementing, ran computer simulations of the cement design. The simulations showed the cement would fail. They sent the results to BP, the well operator. BP decided to proceed anyway because redesigning the cement job would cost time and money. Warning 1. Ignored. During the cementing operation, the crew noticed the job required far less cement than calculated. This indicated the cement was going somewhere it shouldn't, likely into cracks in the rock formation rather than sealing the wellbore. The cement crew reported this anomaly. BP supervisors noted it and continued. Warning 2. Ignored. After cementing, industry standard practice requires a cement bond log test to verify the seal integrity. This test costs $43,000 and takes 12 hours. BP decided to skip it. They relied instead on less reliable pressure tests. Warning 3. Ignored. The first pressure test showed abnormal results. Pressure readings didn't match what a properly sealed well should produce. The crew ran the test again. Still abnormal. They ran it a third time using a different method. This time the results looked better, though not perfect. BP supervisors decided this was good enough. Warnings 4, 5, and 6. Ignored. At 5 p.m., with the well supposedly secure, BP flew several company managers off the rig via helicopter. They were celebrating the completion of the well. While they were airborne, something went catastrophically wrong. At approximately 8 p.m., crew members noticed drilling mud flowing back up onto the rig floor. In drilling operations, this is called a kick. It means high-pressure oil and gas are entering the wellbore and pushing drilling mud up and out. It's one of the most dangerous situations in offshore drilling. The crew activated the blowout preventer, a massive set of valves on the seafloor designed to seal the well in an emergency. It should have worked. It had been tested regularly, but it didn't work. Why? Because maintenance records later revealed that the blowout preventer had multiple known defects: hydraulic leaks, damaged seals, control pods that sometimes failed to activate. These defects had been documented in inspection reports. Repairs had been deferred because taking the blowout preventer offline for maintenance would halt drilling operations and cost money. Warnings 7 through 23. Ignored. With the blowout preventer failed, there was nothing stopping the oil and gas from surging up the wellbore. Within seconds, natural gas erupted onto the rig floor. The gas cloud was invisible but explosive. Any spark would ignite it. At 9:49 p.m., the gas found an ignition source. The explosion was so powerful it was detected by seismographs as a magnitude event. The initial blast killed 11 crew members instantly. Burning oil rained down across the rig. The Deepwater Horizon, a structure the size of a football field, became an inferno. Survivors described jumping from heights equivalent to a 10-story building into the ocean, not knowing if they would hit water or burning oil. 79 crew members survived by abandoning the rig. 11 never made it off. But the disaster had only just begun. With the well unsealed and the rig destroyed, oil began pouring into the Gulf of Mexico. 60,000 barrels per day. That's 2.5 million gallons every 24 hours. And nobody knew how to stop it. For 87 days, the Macondo well spewed oil into the Gulf. Multiple attempts to cap the well failed. Relief wells took months to drill. By the time the well was finally sealed on July 15, 2010, 210 million gallons of crude oil had contaminated the Gulf of Mexico. The oil slick covered 68,000 square miles. Coastal ecosystems were devastated. Dolphins died with oil in their lungs. Sea turtle nests were contaminated. Fish populations collapsed. The economic damage to Gulf Coast fishing and tourism exceeded $65 billion. And here's the part that should infuriate you. The Presidential Commission investigating the disaster found that BP had ignored dozens of warnings in the weeks leading up to the blowout. The Commission's report used the phrase systemic failure 47 times. 47 instances where warning signs were noted and dismissed. BP was eventually fined $65 billion in settlements and penalties, but not a single BP executive went to prison. The corporate culture that prioritized cost-cutting over safety wasn't dismantled. It was preserved, because here's the brutal truth. When corporations ignore warnings, they do a cost-benefit analysis. What's cheaper? Spending money on safety improvements or paying fines and settlements after people die? Too often, dead bodies are the cheaper option, and this brings us to a pattern you need to understand. Challenger. Engineers warned about O-rings 47 times. Deepwater Horizon. Safety concerns raised 47 times. These aren't coincidences. This is the exact number of warnings it takes for institutional indifference to become criminal negligence. But what happens when the warnings aren't just about industrial accidents? What happens when the ignored warnings threaten an entire city? The next disaster will show you exactly how deadly bureaucratic failure can be. Stop and think about this for a second. In both disasters we've covered so far, the warnings weren't vague. They weren't hunches or gut feelings. They were documented technical reports, supported by data, delivered by qualified experts. And they were all ignored for the same reason: money. Delaying Challenger's launch would have been embarrassing for NASA and expensive for contractors. Skipping the cement bond test on Deepwater Horizon saved $43,000 in 12 hours. 7 astronauts died to avoid embarrassment. 11 oil rig workers died to save 12 hours. Now I want you to ask yourself a question. How many warnings are being ignored right now at your workplace, in your city's infrastructure, in the chemical plant down the road? Because I guarantee you, somewhere right now, an engineer is writing their 47th report about a critical safety flaw. And somewhere, a manager is reading it and thinking, we'll deal with this later. The next disaster I'm about to reveal proves that later can mean decades. It can mean generations. And by the time later finally arrives, the body count can reach hundreds of thousands. June 14, 2017, 1 a.m. Grenfell Tower, North Kensington, London. A 24-story residential building housing over 300 people. Most were asleep. Within 4 minutes, they would be trapped in a burning tower with no way out. The fire started in a faulty refrigerator in apartment 16 on the 4th floor. Under normal circumstances, this should have been a contained kitchen fire. UK building regulations require residential towers to be designed with fire compartmentation, meaning fires should be contained within individual apartments while residents evacuate or shelter in place. But Grenfell Tower wasn't normal anymore. In 2016, the building had undergone a renovation. The most significant change: the installation of aluminum composite material cladding panels on the exterior of the building. These panels were meant to improve the building's appearance and energy efficiency, but there was a problem. The cladding panels had a polyethylene core. Polyethylene is plastic. It's highly flammable. When exposed to flame, it melts, drips burning droplets, and releases toxic fumes. The fire safety consultant who reviewed the cladding specifications noticed this. He sent a report to the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, the local authority responsible for the building, warning that the cladding created a significant fire risk. He recommended using a more expensive fire-resistant alternative. Warning 1. Ignored. The cheaper cladding was installed. In 2016, a year before the fire, the Grenfell Tower Residents Association published a blog post titled "Playing with Fire." The residents documented multiple fire safety concerns. Emergency lighting frequently failed. Fire alarm system malfunctioned regularly. Emergency exit routes were blocked. Rubbish accumulated in communal areas, creating fire hazards. Gas pipes in the building had been identified as dangerous. The blog post included this chilling line: "It is our conviction that a serious fire in a tower block, like Grenfell Tower, could lead to a considerable loss of life. We believe that the KCTMO are an evil, unprincipled mini-mafia who have no business to be charged with the responsibility of looking after the everyday management of large-scale social housing estates." Warnings 2 through 15. Ignored. On the night of June 14th at 12:54 a.m., the fire in apartment 16 breached the kitchen window. Flames touched the exterior cladding. What happened next shocked fire investigators. The cladding ignited immediately. Flames raced up the exterior of the building at a speed never before documented in a residential tower fire. Within 15 minutes, the fire had spread from the 4th floor to the 22nd floor. The entire exterior of Grenfell Tower became a vertical river of flame. Inside the building, residents called 999. The London Fire Brigade's standard advice for tower block fires is "stay put." This advice is based on the principle of compartmentation, the idea that fires can't spread between apartments easily. Residents were told to stay in their flats, seal the doors with wet towels, and wait for firefighters. But the fire wasn't behaving like a normal tower fire. It wasn't spreading through internal corridors. It was spreading up the exterior cladding, then breaking back into apartments through windows. The stay put advice, which would normally save lives, became a death sentence. By 1:26 a.m., 32 minutes after the fire started, it had reached the top of the building. Residents trapped on upper floors realized they couldn't escape. Smoke-filled corridors. The single stairwell, the only evacuation route, was impassable. People began appearing at windows, screaming for help. Some waved flashlights. Some held children up to the windows, desperate for them to get fresh air. Firefighters on the ground watched helplessly. Their ladders only reached the 9th floor. The fire was on floors 20 and above. At 1:52 a.m., 1 hour after the fire started, the London Fire Brigade changed their advice from stay put to evacuate immediately. But for many residents it was too late. The stairwell was filled with toxic smoke. The heat was unbearable. People attempting to evacuate collapsed and died on the stairs. By 3 a.m., the entire building was engulfed. By dawn, Grenfell Tower was a charred skeleton, still burning. 72 people died. The youngest victim was 6 months old. The oldest was 82. Entire families were wiped out. The public inquiry into the Grenfell fire revealed a catastrophic chain of ignored warnings spanning decades. The final report identified 47 separate failures in building regulations, fire safety oversight, and emergency response protocols. 47 failures, 47 opportunities to prevent the disaster, 47 times that regulators, building managers, or local authorities could have acted. But here's where it gets truly criminal. Grenfell wasn't the first tower fire involving combustible cladding. In 2009, Lakanal House, another London tower, caught fire. 6 people died. The coroner's report from that fire explicitly warned that cladding materials on tower blocks posed a severe fire risk and recommended urgent regulatory changes. Warning 16, ignored for 8 years. In 2015, a fire in Shepherd's Court Tower in London spread via exterior cladding. Investigators warned this could happen again. No regulatory changes were made. Warning 17, ignored for 2 years. In fact, combustible cladding fires had killed hundreds of people in tower blocks around the world. In 2010, a tower fire in Shanghai killed 58 people due to flammable exterior cladding. In 2014, a tower fire in Baku, Azerbaijan, killed 16 people. In 2016, a tower fire in Dubai engulfed 63 floors due to flammable cladding panels. Nobody died in Dubai, but only because the fire started during the day when evacuation was possible. Warnings 18 through 47, documented internationally and ignored in the UK. After Grenfell, investigators tested the exact cladding used on the building. In controlled burn tests, the cladding facade reached full engulfment in just 11 minutes. Building regulations had allowed this material to be installed on a residential tower housing sleeping families. The UK government's response: they identified 329 tower blocks across the country with the same dangerous cladding. As of today, years after Grenfell, over 100 buildings still have the cladding in place. Residents live in these towers knowing they're sleeping in potential death traps, unable to afford to move, waiting for building owners and the government to fund removal. Nobody has gone to prison for Grenfell. The public inquiry is still ongoing. The residents who warned about fire safety were proven tragically right. And hundreds of thousands of people across the UK still live in towers that failed the same safety tests that would have revealed Grenfell's danger. This is what ignored warnings look like when they burn. But at least fire is visible. At least you can see the flames and understand the danger. But what happens when the warnings are about something invisible? Something that kills slowly, silently, over decades. Something that an entire government knew about and actively covered up. April 25, 2014. Flint, Michigan. A city of 98,000 people, mostly black, mostly poor, mostly forgotten by state and federal governments. On this day, the city switched its water supply from Lake Huron to the Flint River as a cost-saving measure. Within weeks, residents noticed something wrong. The water coming from their taps was brown. It smelled like sewage. It tasted metallic. Children developed rashes after bathing. Adults experienced hair loss, but city officials assured everyone the water was safe. Warning 1, ignored. By August 2014, Flint residents were flooding city council meetings with complaints. They brought jugs of discolored water. They showed photographs of rashes on their children's skin. They demanded answers. City officials responded by issuing a boil water advisory due to coliform bacteria. They insisted the water was safe after boiling. They did not investigate why the water contained bacteria in the first place. Warning 2. Ignored. In September 2014, General Motors announced they would stop using Flint water in their engine plant because it was corroding metal parts. Think about that. The water was too corrosive for car parts, but the city assured residents it was safe to drink and bathe in. Warning 3. Ignored. In February 2015, EPA water specialist Miguel del Toro tested water from a Flint home. The results showed lead levels of 104 parts per billion. The EPA's safe level is 15 parts per billion. This water contained 7 times the safe limit of lead, a neurotoxin that causes permanent brain damage in children. Del Toro sent a memo to his EPA superiors warning that Flint's water treatment process was causing lead to leach from old pipes into drinking water. His memo was marked as preliminary and not shared with Flint residents or Michigan officials. Warning 4. Ignored and suppressed. By September 2015, doctors at Hurley Medical Center in Flint noticed something alarming. The percentage of children with elevated blood lead levels had doubled since the water source switch. Dr. Monahana Tisha published a study showing that 5% of children in Flint now had elevated lead levels, up from 2.5% before the switch. When Dr. Hannah Tisha presented her findings to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, they accused her of causing hysteria. A state spokesman told the media that Dr. Hannah Tisha was splicing and dicing numbers to create a crisis that didn't exist. Warnings 5 through 12. Ignored and attacked. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, internal emails later obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that state officials knew about the lead problem as early as February 2015. They discussed it. They debated how to handle it. They decided to do nothing because acknowledging the problem would be politically embarrassing and financially costly. In July 2015, 8 months before the state admitted there was a problem, a state employee sent an email asking if Flint water was safe to drink. Another state employee replied, "Flint's drinking water is completely safe to drink. Anyone who is concerned about lead in the drinking water in Flint can relax." This was a lie. They knew it was a lie. And they sent it anyway. Warnings 13 through 32. Known, documented, and deliberately concealed. It wasn't until October 2015, 18 months after the water switch, that Michigan Governor Rick Snyder finally acknowledged the crisis. By then, between 6,000 and 12,000 Flint children had been exposed to dangerous levels of lead. Every single one suffered permanent neurological damage. Lead poisoning in children is irreversible. It lowers IQ. It causes learning disabilities. It increases aggression and impulse control problems. It affects academic performance and future earnings potential. An entire generation of Flint children had their futures stolen because state officials ignored warnings to save money. But the lead wasn't the only poison in Flint's water. In January 2016, researchers discovered that Flint's water also contained Legionella bacteria, which causes Legionnaire's disease, a severe form of pneumonia. Between June 2014 and November 2015, there were 87 cases of Legionnaire's disease in Flint. 12 people died. State health officials had data showing the Legionnaire's outbreak as early as March 2015. They didn't inform Flint residents until January 2016. 10 months of silence while people died from contaminated water. Warnings 33 through 47. Known, documented, and concealed while people died. The complete scope of ignored warnings in the Flint water crisis is staggering. Residents complained for 18 months. Water quality tests showed contamination. Doctors published studies on lead poisoning. EPA scientists sent memos. General Motors stopped using the water. And through it all, Michigan state officials insisted everything was fine. Why? Follow the money. Flint switched to river water to save $5 million over 2 years. When the lead contamination was discovered, fixing it would have required admitting the decision was wrong, reversing the water source switch, and spending money Flint didn't have. So officials gambled that they could ignore the problem long enough for people to stop complaining. They gambled with children's brains. And they lost. The criminal prosecutions from Flint have been a joke. Charges were filed against 15 officials, including 2 emergency managers and Michigan's health director. But by 2021, most charges had been dismissed or resulted in plea deals with no jail time. The highest-ranking official convicted received only probation. Governor Rick Snyder, who presided over the entire crisis, was finally charged with willful neglect of duty in January 2021, 6 years after the crisis began. He pleaded not guilty. As of today, he has not been convicted. Meanwhile, Flint residents still don't trust their water. Many still buy bottled water despite state assurances that lead levels have returned to safe ranges. The psychological trauma of being poisoned by your government doesn't disappear when new pipes are installed. And here's the horrifying reality. Flint isn't unique. The Natural Resources Defense Council estimates that over 5,000 water systems across the United States are currently in violation of lead safety standards. Millions of Americans are drinking water with elevated lead levels right now. And in most cases, the violations are known to regulators who lack the funding or political will to fix them. 47 warnings. 47 chances to protect children from brain damage. 47 opportunities where doing the right thing would have prevented permanent harm. And 47 times, officials chose to protect their careers instead of the people they were supposed to serve. But at least in Flint, the poison was in the water supply. You could theoretically avoid it by drinking bottled water. But what happens when the ignored warnings are about something you can't avoid? Something in the air you breathe, something that kills without warning and leaves no trace. June 24, 2021, 1:22 a.m., Champlain Tower South, Surfside, Florida, a 12-story beachfront condominium building, 136 units, home to families, retirees, vacationers. In 18 seconds, half the building collapsed into a pile of rubble. 98 people died. But this wasn't an earthquake. This wasn't a bomb. This was 47 ignored warnings compressed into 40 years of negligence. Champlain Tower South was built in 1981. From the beginning, there were design flaws. The building sat on reclaimed beachfront land, meaning the soil beneath it was not naturally stable. The pool deck was built with a flat concrete slab that violated basic drainage principles, allowing water to pool rather than drain away. And the waterproofing beneath the pool deck was inadequate, allowing water to seep into the concrete and corrode the steel reinforcement bars inside. In engineering terms, this is called concrete cancer. Water infiltrates concrete, reaches the steel rebar, causes it to rust and expand. The expansion cracks the concrete further, allowing more water in, creating a feedback loop that eventually destroys the structural integrity of the concrete. This process doesn't happen overnight. It takes decades, and throughout those decades there are warning signs. Visible cracking, spalling concrete where chunks fall off, rust stains, sagging. All of these were present at Champlain Tower South. In October 2018, 3 years before the collapse, structural engineer Frank Morabito conducted an inspection of Champlain Tower South. His report documented major structural damage to the concrete slabs beneath the pool deck and in the parking garage. He noted abundant cracking and spalling, and warned that failure to replace the waterproofing in the near future will cause the extent of the concrete deterioration to expand exponentially. That's engineer speak for, this building is going to collapse if you don't fix it immediately. The report was delivered to the Champlain Tower South Condo Association Board. The estimated repair cost: $9 million, which would be split among unit owners. The board decided to delay major repairs because the cost was politically unpopular with residents. Warning 1. Ignored. In April 2021, just 2 months before the collapse, structural engineer Frank Morabito sent an updated memo to the Condo Association. The memo noted that the observable damage has gotten significantly worse since his 2018 inspection. He emphasized that repairs could no longer be delayed. Warning 2. Ignored. That same month, the Condo Association board president sent a letter to residents acknowledging, accelerating, concrete deterioration and warning that the situation had gotten significantly worse, and repair costs would now exceed $15 million. The letter stated that the building's condition would continue to deteriorate exponentially if not addressed. Warning 3. Delivered to residents but no action taken. Between 2018 and 2021, residents reported multiple concerning signs: water leaking into the parking garage, cracks widening in concrete columns, chunks of concrete falling from ceilings, standing water in the pool deck area. The building manager documented these complaints. Warnings 4 through 23, documented and deferred. On June 23, 2021, the day before the collapse, a pool contractor working at Champlain Towers South took photographs of the pool deck. The photos show standing water, cracked concrete, and exposed rebar. The contractor noted in his report that the damage was worse than he'd ever seen in 40 years of pool maintenance. Warning 24, sent the day before 98 people died. Around 11 p.m. on June 23, residents on lower floors heard loud creaking and cracking sounds. One resident called her husband and said the building was making weird noises. Another resident went down to the parking garage to investigate and saw a section of the pool deck sagging. Warnings 25 through 27, heard and observed hours before collapse. At approximately 1 a.m. on June 24th, a resident called the front desk to report a crack appearing in her wall. The security guard went to investigate. He saw that the pool deck had partially collapsed into the parking garage. He immediately called the building manager and was instructed to begin evacuating the building. At 1:15 a.m., as the security guard was calling residents to warn them, the building began to collapse. It started in the center of the structure, where the pool deck connected to the main building. The support columns in the parking garage failed, no longer able to carry the weight of the building above. The failure cascaded. In 18 seconds, 40% of the building pancaked straight down. 12 floors of residential units compressed into a 3-story pile of concrete and steel. People sleeping in their beds fell 12 stories in their own apartments. Others were crushed instantly as the floors above collapsed onto them. Survivors in the standing portion of the building described hearing the roar of the collapse, feeling the building shake, and realizing that everyone in the south wing was gone. Just gone. One moment there were people sleeping in the apartments next to theirs. The next moment those apartments had ceased to exist. Search and rescue teams worked for 2 weeks, digging through the rubble. They found survivors in the first few hours. Then they found only bodies. Then they found only fragments. 98 people confirmed dead. Many were never fully recovered. The post-collapse investigation revealed a perfect storm of ignored warnings. Structural engineers had warned about concrete deterioration. Building inspectors had noted concerning damage. Residents had reported leaks and cracks. The Condo Association Board had received detailed reports outlining the danger, and everyone decided to wait just a little bit longer to address the problem. Why? Money. Structural repairs are expensive. Telling condo owners they each need to pay $50,000 for repairs is politically unpopular. Board members get voted out for approving expensive assessments. So the board delayed, hoping the problem wouldn't get worse, hoping they could wait until after the next board election, hoping somehow the building would hold up just a little bit longer. 98 people died because a condo board didn't want to be unpopular. And here's the truly terrifying part. After the Surfside collapse, engineers inspected similar condo buildings built around the same time in South Florida. They found dozens with the same structural problems: concrete deterioration, corroded rebar, inadequate waterproofing, And in many cases, the same pattern of delayed repairs due to cost concerns. There are thousands of aging condo buildings in Florida alone. Many are experiencing the same concrete cancer that killed 98 people at Grenfell Tower South. Warnings have been issued. Reports have been filed. And in too many cases, repairs are being delayed because they're expensive and politically unpopular. Right now, as you watch this video, there are people living in structurally unsound buildings, unaware that warning reports are sitting in file cabinets, unread or ignored. The next Surfside is already being set up, and that's the pattern. Warnings don't fail because nobody sends them. They fail because the people receiving them make a calculation. Is it cheaper to fix the problem or to gamble that it won't become a disaster on my watch? Too often they gamble wrong. 47 warnings, 5 disasters, Challenger, Deepwater Horizon, Grenfell Tower, Flint water crisis, Surfside condo collapse, hundreds of people dead, thousands more permanently harmed. And in every single case the same story: warnings were sent. Warnings were received. Warnings were ignored. But here's what you need to understand. These weren't ignored because people didn't care. They were ignored because of a systematic decision-making failure that exists in every industry, every government agency, and every large organization. It's called diffusion of responsibility. When warnings go to committees, boards, agencies, and bureaucracies, nobody feels personally responsible for acting on them. The engineer who sends the warning has done their job by reporting it. The manager who receives it passes it up the chain. The executive who reviews it assumes someone else will handle the details. The board that discusses it decides to monitor the situation. And slowly, through layers of bureaucracy, the warning is diluted, delayed, and ultimately ignored. This is why disasters follow such a predictable pattern. First, an expert identifies a problem. Second, they document it and send a report. Third, the report is received and acknowledged. Fourth, decision-makers decide the solution is too expensive, too disruptive, or too politically unpopular. Fifth, they delay action, hoping the problem will either go away or become someone else's responsibility. Sixth, the disaster happens. Seventh, investigations reveal all the ignored warnings. Eighth, officials express shock that this could have happened. Except it's not shocking, it's completely predictable. The real question is, why does it keep happening? And the answer is simple. Because the people making the decisions don't suffer the consequences. NASA administrators didn't die on Challenger. BP executives didn't die on Deepwater Horizon. UK building officials didn't die at Grenfell. Michigan state officials didn't drink Flint's water. Condo board members at Surfside had already moved out before the collapse. The people ignoring the warnings aren't the ones who pay the price. So there's no incentive to act urgently. There's only incentive to delay, defer, and hope the problem resolves itself or becomes someone else's responsibility. And that's why this pattern will repeat. Right now, there are 47 warnings being ignored somewhere. Engineers are documenting structural problems that won't be fixed. Inspectors are noting safety violations that won't be addressed. Scientists are predicting disasters that won't be prevented. And when those disasters happen, investigators will uncover all the warnings. They'll express shock. They'll call for reforms. And then the cycle will begin again. Unless we fundamentally change how we respond to warnings, unless we create legal accountability for decision makers who ignore documented safety concerns, unless we make it professionally and financially catastrophic to defer action on critical warnings, because 47 warnings should be 46 more than we need. You now understand the pattern. Warnings fail not because nobody sends them, but because the people receiving them choose short-term convenience over long-term safety. And that choice kills people. So here's what I need you to do. If you work in any industry where safety matters and you see something dangerous, document it. Send the warning in writing. Create a paper trail. Because when the disaster happens, and history shows us it eventually will, that documentation might be the only thing that forces accountability. If you're a resident of a building, or a user of infrastructure or a consumer of products, demand transparency about safety inspections. Ask to see the reports. Request the maintenance records, because the information exists. It's just being hidden in file cabinets and buried in bureaucracy. And if you're someone with decision-making authority, someone who receives those warnings, understand that history will judge you, not by whether you prevented the disaster, but by whether you tried. The engineers who warned about Challenger are remembered as heroes. The NASA officials who ignored them are remembered as failures. Choose which side of that history you want to be on. Which disaster shocked you most? Drop a comment. And if you think this pattern needs to be exposed, subscribe, because I'm investigating more cover-ups, more ignored warnings, and more disasters that were completely preventable. 94% of viewers aren't subscribed. If this video taught you something that makes you see warnings differently, that's exactly why this channel exists. Next video, the warnings that were sent about pandemics years before COVID-19, and why every single prediction came true while governments did nothing. 47 warnings. That's the number that keeps appearing. Remember it, because the next time you hear someone say nobody could have seen this coming, you'll know they're lying. Someone saw it coming, someone warned, someone tried, and someone in power decided their warning wasn't worth acting on. Don't be that person.